Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mass Retirees Weekly Update. Today is Friday, May 12th. I'm Sean Duhamel. Thank you so much for being with us and tuning in again this week. Now, I've got news to share on two different fronts, one being the cost of living adjustment and the ongoing work in the State House in Boston to try to increase the COLA base for state and teacher retirees for the coming fiscal year, as well as some local health insurance news, which continues a really strong trend in terms of surviving spouse health care. But let me start with the COLA. So this Tuesday, the State Senate unveiled its version of the FY24 state budget. If you recall, the House of Representatives took up its own version of the budget last month. We had attempted at that time through the House budget process to offer an amendment that would have increased the state and COLA base up to $16,000. And I think all of you know by now that unfortunately the House chose not to move forward at this time in increasing the base, largely because of concerns over state tax revenues declining in April, which unfortunately proved to be true, and I reported on that last week. In addition, also some concern over the long-term impact of the cost of increasing the COLA base by $3,000. We had proposed going from the current $13,000 base that was established back in 2011 up to a new base of $16,000 going forward. Now, as we have reported time and time again, there's no way of getting around the fact that these benefits are expensive. This just is what it is, as they say. A $3,000 increase in the COLA base for members of the state and teacher retirement systems would add $1.5 billion in new unfunded liability to the state's or the Commonwealth's pension funding schedule. And what that correlates to is a potential increase in the state budget in FY27, which would be the next time the state would have or will revalue its funding schedule. Every 3 years, the state is required to revalue the funding schedule for the state and teacher retirement systems, as well as for any other pension liabilities that the Commonwealth may be responsible for. So this coming year, FY24, will be the start of a new 3-year funding schedule, where the appropriation for FY24 will be a little bit over $4.1 billion in state tax monies going to fund the state's share of the state and teacher retirement system. So there's a lot of money being spent. Benefit increases are costly. There's no way to get around that. However, all of us know just how important these issues are, and when we've met with both the House leadership and the Senate leadership, to a person, whether they be Republicans or Democrats, I believe that everybody's on the same page in terms of the importance of these benefits and the validity of our position of making incremental improvements. The trick is, how do you fund it going forward? And the House chose not to include it in the budget, but we're continuing to have ongoing conversations with House leadership, whether it's in relation to what the Senate may or may not do, or trying to find a vehicle in the coming months over the course of the rest of this legislative session to try to find a way to move forward with this. But for now, our focus is going to be on the state Senate's version of the budget. So as I started to say, this past Tuesday, the Senate released its version of the budget. It includes a 3% state and teacher COLA on the current $13,000 base. And when I mention the COLA base, that's the portion of a retiree's pension that the COLA is applied to. So in the case of state and teacher retirees, the 3% COLA, for instance, would only be applied to the first $13,000 of your pension, even though your pension may be a lot larger than that. And that's just the way our system works here in Massachusetts. And over time, we've been able to make incremental improvements to that base. So what we are proposing in the Senate budget is two different vehicles to try to provide some assistance to retirees for the coming fiscal year, in light of the fact that we're still facing very high inflation. Even though inflation is starting to come down and that there's some light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, there's no escaping the fact that it still remains high. As a matter of fact, earlier this week, the federal government released the latest consumer price index information. The CPI is the leading indicator of the impact of inflation on people. And year over year, so April 2022 to April 2023, the consumer price index year over year is about 4.9, just about 5%. So, this is just a further verification of what we already know. Anytime you go to the supermarket, for instance, you're seeing those high grocery prices. There's no way to get around it. And we continue to remind legislators of this fact, and they understand that and they get it. So what we have done in the Senate is propose two different amendments. One is the same amendment that we offered in the House of Representatives that would increase the state and teacher COLA base by $3,000 up to a new level of $16,000 for the coming fiscal year. And that would carry the same price tag that it carried in the Senate. Carried in the House. There's no way to get around that. And we're open to negotiation. We believe that a $3,000 increase is justified. It's now been 12 years since the state increased the base for state and teacher retirees, so it's long overdue. And we believe that the combination of the past success of the retirement system's investment returns, as well as our expectation of future investment returns, will more or less offset the ongoing cost of that benefit increase. However, if Senate leaders are reluctant to address the base because of the same concerns expressed by the House leadership, we are offering an alternative approach. And that approach would be the same as what the legislature opted to do a year ago, and that is to approve a 5% COLA for state and teacher retirees that would take effect on July 1st, along with a local option to increase the local COLA percentage from the standard 3% that's been traditionally paid for the last 25, 26 years up to 5%. But our proposal this year goes back to our original proposal in last year's budget cycle in terms of the local option provision. Instead of requiring local communities and local governments, so the Board of Selectmen of the City Council and mayors, to have to approve the additional 2% COLA at the local level, what we have proposed is that the local retirement systems, the 102 local retirement boards who are responsible as fiduciaries for maintaining a healthy, sustainable retirement system, that the authority to grant the additional 2% COLA for the next fiscal year would be put in their hands. And we're very hopeful that the Senate will look at these different options and find a way to help state and teacher retirees with a little bit of a boost for the coming year. Even though our long-term goal, of course, is to continue to improve the COLA base and make increases there, even though they're going to have to be incremental because of the cost, we want to provide the ability for the Senate leadership and then the House leadership through the conference committee process to find a way to increase these benefits for FY24, put a little bit more money into people's pockets when they most need it, and we'll continue to work on these issues going forward. Now, the COLA is always going to remain a work in progress. We're never going to get to a point, at least not in the foreseeable future, where we can sit back and say we're all set, we don't need to make any continued improvements, because that's just not the case. One of the things that we're really focused on, and we've been talking about this now over the past couple of years, is creating something that we call a senior COLA that would provide additional assistance for retirees who have been retired for a number of years, who were career public servants. And as you all know, the longer you're retired, the purchasing power of your pension or your Social Security benefit, if you're fortunate enough to receive one, or any other retirement savings that you accumulated over the years, the purchasing power of those benefits declines over time. That's just unfortunately the way it works. But we need to find ways to help people get ahead a little bit, and that's what we're going to continue to be focused on. So the two amendments have been filed for the Senate budget. The COLA base amendment has been filed by State Senator Mike Brady. He is from the city of Brockton. He is also the chairman of the Joint Committee on Public Service on the Senate side. The COLA percentage amendment has been filed by State Senator Brendan Crichton from the city of Lynn. Senator Crichton is the Senate chairman of the Joint Committee on Transportation. So both of these committees are very important. Transportation, of course, to the entire state. Public service, certainly central to our concerns, where all of the retirement-related legislation and public health insurance legislation goes before the Public Service Committee to kick things off. So both Senator Brady and Senator Crichton have long been close friends and allies of our association. They're both staunch supporters of public retirees. So we know full well that each of these senators are going to be putting their best effort forward to help us get this through the process, get it included in the Senate budget during the week of May 22nd is when the Senate will be taking it up. Unfortunately, as I'm recording this late on Thursday, we do not have amendment numbers just yet. That information will be released maybe as early as Friday evening. You can find it on the Senate's website. The link to find the amendment numbers is contained in today's email message that came out from me, and we'll be publishing that information on our website, massretirees.com. As soon as that information is available, we'll also get it up on our Facebook page. Now, the last bit of news I want to share with you, which we are very encouraged by this, for the second time this year, a local town has, through town meeting, I shouldn't say unanimously because it wasn't unanimous, but overwhelmingly approved increased benefits for surviving spouses in terms of health insurance premium contributions from the towns. Now, the ability to pay for a portion of a surviving spouse's health insurance is a local option. Across the state, about 2/3 of municipalities now pay at least 50% of a surviving spouse's insurance benefit, health insurance benefit. But that still leaves 100 or so communities that don't, and they never have. The state cannot mandate that they provide these benefits. It's a decision of the local government and the local citizens through the town meeting process in a town. And most of these communities that have chosen over the years not to provide a contribution for those benefits are smaller towns. So in this case, the town of Middleborough, and you may have read about this in our main newsletter, earlier this year, Middleborough Town Meeting voted to increase the surviving spouse's health insurance contribution from a 50-50 split up to the same benefit that was being provided to the retiree prior to them passing away. So this was a great increase in benefits. In the case of the town of Foxboro, who just earlier this week on Monday voted to go from a zero contribution up to 50-50, the Foxboro Town Meeting overwhelmingly approved that benefit, like I said, just earlier this week. In both of these cases, these issues were spearheaded at the local level by members of our association. In Middleborough, it was through members of the Middleborough Health Insurance Coalition that's been formed for retirees. Both the chairman and vice chairman are members of our association. They took the bull by the horns and spearheaded this at the local level with some technical assistance from us of just getting them the information they needed. And I should credit Bill Reary, our general counsel, for working very closely with our local retirees to help them move these issues forward and provide, again, the technical assistance that was needed. And the same thing occurred in Foxboro, where we had a local retiree who's a retired fire chief, and he single-handedly took the bull by the horns and helped lead this through the process through Foxboro Town Meeting, through the Finance Committee, who supported this measure. And it is a huge benefit for our surviving spouses at the local level. Now, at the state level, the state for many, many decades now has provided a 90-10 contribution, whereby the state provides 90% of the premium support for surviving spouses. So it is a fantastic benefit at the state level through the GIC. But at the local level, it's really a hodgepodge across the state with, again, many of the smaller towns not funding the benefit at all, which is really shameful in today's day and age, where people lose their spouse and all of a sudden they find that they have to pay 100% of their health care costs themselves. So we're very grateful that we have members at the local level making the grassroots effort to get this done. And we're very hopeful that other communities will soon follow suit, and we'll see now a trend locally of surviving spouse benefits being increased because it's the right thing to do at the end of the day. So with that, I'm going to sign off for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back to you next week with an update of what we're seeing with the Senate budget. We're also going to start talking more about some of the other legislation that we have filed for the current legislative session and getting into some of those details. But thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye, everybody.